depending on whether you're on the East Coast or the West Coast. This is Lauren Kelly, and welcome to the May SaaS Benchmarking Community webinar. I'd like to get started today. We're very excited about the topic, sales and finance working together as friends or foes. A little bit of a kind of controversial topic, and we don't really mean it that way. I think in the SaaS world, we all know that cooperation tends to lead to better outcomes, but sales and finance have often had difficulties in the past on various issues that are critical to the company. So we're excited to have a terrific team here that I'm going to tell you about in a few minutes from Scribe Software. But first off, I just want to ask everyone in the audience to make sure that your phones are on mute. It is automatically muted, but if you're having trouble, make sure that you dial in on a landline because that tends to work a lot better. We encourage questions in our monthly webinars, so we will answer questions either during the course of the webinar or at the end, and we'll leave a little bit of time hopefully at the end. And then if you'd like and have any questions that occur to you afterwards, we're happy to answer those or send them forward to someone who can give you a better answer than we can. So first off, I'm going to explain a little bit about the OPEXEngine SaaS benchmarking community. I think most of the people on the phone are members of the SaaS benchmarking community, but for those of you that have been invited to join us today as friends and family, the SaaS benchmarking community is something that OPEXEngine runs, and it's for subscribers to our benchmarking data platform, as well as the SaaS benchmarking community, where we have these monthly webinars on various specific topics of interest, typically to finance and operations within a software or SaaS company. We also have biannual meetups on the East Coast, West Coast, and in Denver. And we do quarterly, I'll actually jump into that next, quarterly, oops, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit here. Quarterly research topics. In Q1, we looked at sales ops. In Q2, we are currently just launching a deep dive survey on sales commissions, what are variable rates for different positions in SaaS companies, a whole variety of questions. So if anyone's interested in that and participating in that, that would be terrific. We'll be looking at compensation expense benchmarks in Q3. And then in Q4, I'm very excited to say that we're going to be looking at R&D productivity and some new ways of measuring that. So we love what we do. We've put together this benchmarking platform. OPEXEngine is a group of fairly experienced folks who have been in software and SaaS for quite some time. And we've been doing the benchmarking for 10 years. We have an extensive database, over 80,000 data points over 10 years. Over 300 companies participate, putting their data into our benchmarking platform where we collect detailed financials and operating metrics for each department of a typical software or SaaS company and allow you to compare yourself against peer groups defined in 60 different ways and apply those metrics-driven discipline to your financial planning. So with that, I will jump right into our topic for today. We are talking about sales and finance, and we have three great people, and I'm so appreciative that they've volunteered to participate in the webinar today. We have Rich Knoll, who's the VP of Finance and Administration at Scribe Software. And all these guys work together, so they're all in the same company. So can't say anything that they're not going to be held to every day after this. Lou Antonucci, who is the VP of Sales at Scribe, as well as Christian Danish, who is the Director of Sales Operations, but also operations, as he'll explain to you, throughout the company. Scribe is a agile data integration software, and what's particularly interesting in the context of this is transitioning from a perpetual license business model to a SaaS business model. And as you can imagine, all the operational and sales issues around that, but is very highly rated by Gartner and Forrester. So with that, I'm going to ask, let's have Rich first describe a little bit about your background and how you came to Scribe, and then we'll move on to Lou after that. So Rich, can you tell us a little bit about your background? And you may be on mute as well, so if you all can make sure that you're not muted at your end.
Hi, I guess I was muted. Can you hear me now?
Yep, no worries. It's good and clear now.
All right, great. Hi, my name is Rich. I've been with Scribe now for almost 10 years, and I handle all the financial planning and analysis. And I also work closely with Lou Antonucci on our compensation plans and our variable plans. And I also work closely with Christian on our sales operations, and I also have HR under my umbrella as well. And prior to joining Scribe 10 years ago, I worked, I imported goods, and we sold them to wholesalers throughout the country. So I have some import-export extensive experience with that as well.
Oh, great. Thanks. And Lou, can you tell us a little bit about your background and different sort of sales models you've dealt with, and then also just how that affects your work at Scribe?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Lou Antonucci, the sales. My role here at Scribe is I oversee the sales organization, and we focus on our sales either selling directly to end users or through systems integrators. And that's all of our data integration platforms that we provide. My background, a little bit about my background. I've been with Scribe now, I think it'll be 12 years in August. And it actually seems like just yesterday that I started with the company. I was previously with a number of companies, Hewlett-Packard way back when in the HP Way days, working with our reseller channels, actually involved with our actually setting up our worldwide reseller channel model for channel sales, and then also worked with Avnet Hallmark. And that some of you may know that's a large distributor of both hardware and software products. So selling, directly, but also through resellers, and then also through two-tier selling models. So I have an extensive background in that. I won't say how many years I've been in the business, but certainly quite a few. And now, at Scribe, facing a number of challenges as we move from years ago, where we were primarily an on-premise software provider for our integration toolkits, to now being a cloud iPaaS integration platform as a service provider. So that in itself has brought along a number of challenges in terms of how sales works with our resellers and end users, but also with our finance and operations folks here.
Yeah, that's great. A great description, because there are a lot of complexities there. So Christian, you're responsible for operations and right in the thick of it. Could you give us a little bit of your background, not just at Scribe, but also before that, because I think you bring a unique variety of experience to the job.
Great, thank you. This is Christian Damish. I've been with Scribe just about over a year now, year and a couple months. And as the Director of Operations, I was brought to the company really to help from an interdepartmental standpoint, determine how we address problems with process systems and expertise. So I spent a lot of time with groups such as finance and sales working through their challenges and sort of objectives so that we can grow as a company going forward. My background is pretty diverse in the respect that the last company I came from, I was the head of the sales operations and sales engineering team. I also have worked in product marketing and product management, and then way back when as a developer. So I have also a degree in statistics. So I like the data. I like looking at trends and being able to analyze how a business is running through our data. I also have worked. This is the second company I've worked with Lou, so we have some previous exposure to each other in a sales product marketing role.
Oh, great. And did you say, do you sit actually in sales technically, or in finance, or some other?
Yes. So I report to Rich right now, but I take a large majority of my direction from our CEO also. He's so I tend to take direction from both areas, both the finance area and then also from the leadership of the company.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So as I said when I kicked this off, I said this is I'm very excited about this topic, and I should say up front that while I've been at OPEXEngine, I'm talking to finance people all day and primarily dealing with finance issues. I have a long history myself in sales and in sales management, and I just think this whole topic of finance and sales cooperation and communication is so incredibly important. So that really, I'd love to kick the topic off and just talk about, each department has its own mission, and the most effective companies manage to bring everybody's mission together in moving the company forward and hopefully doing that fast and efficiently. If you could just speak, and I'll start back with Rich again, just sort of define, what you think the most important goals of finance are for you, and then we'll do that with each person, because I think it's important to, see where people's objectives are first off.
Really, it's in the financial planning and also in the analysis. And in the financial planning area, it's really working closely with our sales leadership, Lou, and our director that we have in Europe on really developing sales plans at the beginning of the year, and also monitoring those sales plans throughout the year.
Mm-hmm. And then from your perspective, Lou, I assume it's about revenue growth, customer satisfaction. What do you see as your primary goal?
Well, it was interesting. I just jotted them down, and you just mentioned them both. Obviously, our growth in monthly recurring revenue is the number one target of all of us in this room, as a matter of fact. And then also customer success, growing our installed base of customers as well. So, in doing that, obviously, I can't even begin to look at how do we grow our revenues without having the data and the financial history that I work so closely, myself and our directors in EMEA work so closely with Rich on in finance, to understand, the trends of how our business has grown, how the market's growing, and how we can then plan for our growth around bookings and MRR revenue growth.
And that's a great point in terms of the data. And talking to Christian, how much do you think your objective is to really mine the data in terms of, from a customer perspective, of what are the most profitable customer types? What's the low-hanging fruit? Which types of customers, which cohorts have the fastest sales cycles, that kind of thing. How much would you say, in terms of your objectives on a day-to-day basis, are kind of maintenance of administration and the kind of financial things that need to get done, or that kind of analysis that really drives the company forward and that is more forward-looking?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. I think that the best use of my time is making sure individuals like Rich and Lou have the information they need to make decisions, and their team members. So we use Salesforce internally to manage our sales operations, and the whole company essentially is really invested in that platform. So I manage that platform from a holistic standpoint to ensure that we have the best quality data, the best quality processes to support what we're trying to do. So a lot of what I'll end up doing is working with each team to understand their individual objectives, and then hopefully making sure that our tools are there to support it, or recommending alternatives to say, in my experience, or, in webinars like this where I've heard other ideas, we might want to go down this road because this is a better way of doing it than we've done it in the past. So I spent a lot more of my time, and I think that's a lot more valuable, looking at how we can analyze the business so we make better decisions going forward.
Yeah, and it sounds to me from what I'm hearing, it's not like the operations team is scrambling to just keep up with, getting the commission reports done, making sure that the reconciliations are done. It sounds like you do have time to actually do the analysis that helps out the other departments like sales.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of we're an integration company, so my predecessors have done a pretty good job of wiring things together in a lot of different ways between our finance system and our our CRM systems such as Salesforce, and a lot of our sort of our back-end processes, as well as our platform, the platform we sell, Scribe Online. So a lot of what we do is tweaking. It's optimizing. It's really not reacting to fires. It's more about how do we do stuff better. So that's it's a good place to be. Doesn't mean that we don't always end up in that situation once in a while, but it's more infrequent than frequent.
And I think one of the things that this is Lou. One of the things that benefit all of us and benefit the company is that we decided quite some time ago that our Salesforce deployment, our CRM system, would be our system of record for the company, and that, along with the other tools that we use for analysis that are bolted in there, and those are the types of things that Christian and his team ensure that all of that smoothly works together for us, right? Or when we look at new type of analysis tools or other tools we might look at for prospecting purposes, we actually sit down as a group and go through the evaluation of that, and particularly with Christian in the operations side, to make sure that we understand that this could, what's involved with integrating that into our other systems, so it all can work seamlessly. And again, we're not reacting to fires because we don't have the tools. We're working, and it's just like tweaking here and there to make them work better.
Oh, that's great. So I'm going to also kick off the conversation, in a little bit of the direction from the title of our webinar, Friend or Foe. I think when we had a prep call, we had a great conversation about the difference between friction versus healthy discussion. I think for everybody on the webinar, and I certainly have experienced it, and I think most people in the business have experienced, there can be differences of opinion within a growing company, or even a company that's not growing, and it can lead to sort of a bad situation, a frictional situation, or it can lead to healthy discussion of different, ways of getting ahead. And I think I don't know if it was you, Christian, who brought up the point that, the point of friction is that, in physics, that's the force that opposes forward movement. It's wasted energy. And, at the same time, given the fact that you all come from different backgrounds and have different jobs to do, you're going to have different ways of getting to what, in the end, are the company goals. So give us any sort of general thoughts you have about how you approach a discussion with each other on something that we'll get into shortly in terms of some of the topics that can lead to friction in a lot of companies. You want to start that one, Lou?
Yeah, I think, how we approach it. Well, number one, we have a number of weekly meetings in various settings. We have a once a month executive team meeting, and quite honestly, it's really an open door policy here. I mean, we're also, the three of us are so close. It's literally, how we approach when we've got issues that we've got to talk about, or whether there's something that could cause friction. We literally say, okay, we need to get together on this and let's discuss it. if that's what you were asking. I mean, there are a number of different areas I think we'll get into in a few minutes where there could be friction, and there typically is, and we could talk about how we deal with those as we talk about each one.
This is Rich. We're very, very data-driven, and so all of our decisions and all our discussions, it always comes back to the data and what's the data telling us. So even though we may have some disagreements at first, when we sit down and really look at the black and white numbers, we seem to come around to a good spot.
And that's the advantage of having those tools in place I talked about earlier, because all of those tools, our Salesforce system, we use Insight Squared for all of our trend analysis within Salesforce and a number of other tools. Having that data available is just, like Rich said, it's the thing that makes these discussions very easy, because the data, at the end of the day, doesn't lie.
Yep. No, I think that's absolutely true, and frankly, after 25 years in software management, a large part of the reason I started OPEXEngine was to contribute to data-driven decision-making as compared to, decision-making sometimes it's driven by emotion or, different people's perspectives or ability to articulate their perspective, regardless of the data, because nobody had the data. So I think it's a great point. Data tends to take the emotion and the friction and the weaker decision making out of the picture. So I think I'm gonna move on specifically to the issues, but the one thing I wanted to mention on this this slide about culture is one thing that I did want to pull out in the conversation, because you had mentioned it previously in terms of transitioning, and I think transitions can also create a lot of friction, and particularly because transitions tend to, it's hard to get immediate results when you're in a transitional model, whether it's going from perpetual license to SaaS, or it's going from, a smaller average contract value to trying to organize a sales, and train and figure out the sales process for selling a larger average contract value. That doesn't always happen overnight, and sometimes that can create friction between sales and finance, because finance has a plan and sales is trying to execute on that plan, but sometimes things don't work exactly to plan. Do you want to comment a little bit on that? Because I think one of you had brought that up in our conversation about this before, but I think transitions also can, you have to have a good culture to support transitions.
This is Lou. We've been going through a very interesting transition over the past few years, and that is, transitioning from a model of selling on-premise software, where pretty much our plans were always based on bookings, right, to now moving to a model where the majority of our products and services are, online and subscription-based. So now we're moving to a model of monthly recurring revenue. And it's not bad if you're a company and you're starting out with a model that's all monthly recurring revenue. It's probably easy to start out with your comp plans and how you build your plan. With us, in this transition, I have to look at the fact that we have a whole sales team that traditionally has been, for example, their commission plans have been based on bookings. Our plan itself, our company plan, is based on bookings. But at the same time, we need to hit a particular target in MRR. So this year, in this transition, we've had to look at how do we evolve our compensation plans. So we still have compensation plans based on bookings, but we've added a number of incentives around MRR, monthly recurring revenue. Now, to manage that and track that, I've gone to Christian in operations and said, if there's a way we can have a view of this, of the MRR, right within Salesforce as a rep books that deal, then that will actually help us manage and incent. So then Christian and his team was able to have this view available for us that, once a deal is booked, it shows what that MRR that goes along with that deal is. And then, of course, working with finance, we're running this balance between hitting a bookings plan and hitting MRR targets. And again, it's with Rich and the finance team constantly looking at the data, tracking on a monthly basis where we are MRR, where we are booking, really helps us all to work together to make this transition. We eventually would probably evolve into all of our compensation plans, and our plans will be based on MRR. But right now, it's very challenging, but I think we've been able to get through it so far.
The one point I'd add there, and it speaks to your slide too, is the benefit that we have when we're talking about these transitions is having very, very clear leadership from our leader in our organization. So when we get into these conversations, there's generally or almost no disagreement related to what our objectives are. So while we might be faced with these really difficult discussions around these transitions, how do we measure, how do we perform in these moments, we have a very clear directive that we're all following. So that helps set the baseline for everybody to sort of work underneath, and then it just really becomes a lot of conversations. You might have a little bit of a disagreement based on your opinions or your perspectives, but that's just getting through that as part of the discussion is the benefit of having multiple people involved.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think, Rich, from your perspective in finance, sometimes transitions are hard because you don't obviously have the history to make some of the assumptions about what the numbers are going to be. And obviously benchmarking can help that, but every company is a little bit different in terms of how they go through a transition. So how do you work that with sales to make sure that you're doing the right thing in terms of forecasting and the assumptions that you're using?
One of the problems that I had was really, you mentioned it with benchmarking, because going through this transition, I can find online benchmarking data, say, just on SaaS businesses, but we're not fully a SaaS company yet. We're still selling perpetual. So it was really hard for me to gauge how our business was progressing without having that data. And subscribing to OPEXEngine this year has helped me out in that respect. And in terms of the financial planning and the sales plan with Lou, we really build our plans bottoms up, and we look at every single partner in their history and how our partners are transitioning their business, whether or not they're still selling perpetual or they're moving to our online product. So we work pretty closely on a very bottoms-up approach to our sales plans. And even though there's some hiccups along the way when we're coming up with a final number, it's all based on data. So we come out in a good spot generally.
Oh, good. Well, that's impressive. You must be doing it right. So let's dig into some of the specific areas where finance and sales sort of can either butt heads or work together cooperatively. First and foremost around sales productivity and targets. I think, Rich, you had some thoughts about, how do you deal with that? How do you come up with, and, feel free to share any examples of areas where you've had maybe butted heads with Lou, even though I know you guys work incredibly well together, but, it's just natural in terms of the course of doing business.
I'd say the major areas, and we've both touched on it a few times during this, is really on the financial plans and building those up, and also building out the commission structures, because as Lou mentioned, we're evolving our commission structures and our variable comp to drive more MRR. So there's been some pretty good discussions on comp plans and how we achieve our objectives.
If we just talk a little bit about on the sales productivity side, and I see your note there on the slide, Lauren, where it says getting the deal done, creative terms. And those are areas where you typically, from a sales organization, is where you have some friction with finance. But again, this goes back to we're able to manage this pretty well because it goes back in the sales productivity. It goes back to the fact that we have, our Salesforce system, our CRM system, is our system of record. And so therefore, the account executives themselves are responsible for, at the end of the day, how their commissions come out. They're responsible for how their deals get booked, because what happens is all of that information in a particular opportunity that gets closed, there are certain rules. For example, it needs to be specified, the partner, if we're selling through a partner, that needs to be in the opportunity, and that partner has a particular margin associated with it. If there's MRR associated with it, that gets put into the opportunity automatically if the sales rep puts in the proper subscription days. So if the sales rep does not properly and effectively input into their opportunities and close their opportunities correctly, then when it comes out the other end in finance, there may be an issue, and finance will say, it doesn't have this, it doesn't have this, or if there's a commission report that goes to the rep and the rep said, well, wait, I didn't get commission on this particular opportunity. It turns out when we talk to finance says, well, if you look at the opportunity, it didn't have this required. So it's kind of it's a two-way street. It's not a, they versus us type of situation, because it's incumbent on our sales team to properly enter the data. If the data is properly entered, then we don't have a lot of these friction areas with finance, and then it allows for greater productivity of the sales team.
That's
it's
great.
It's almost like a built-in checks and balances, if you will. But it's really, at the end of the day, the sales rep is responsible for how their deals get booked and how finance then runs through with the commissions and so on.
This is Rich. I'd like to add on a little bit something too. Sometimes there's friction as well, because where the sales team is trying to get creative on a deal so they can close it, whether it's creative with terms or it's out of the ordinary. And Lou and I have had many discussions in the past, and my question is, that's great, but how do I track it? How am I going to report on this each month if it's so far out of our normal course of business? And again, we've had some pretty healthy discussions about that over the years.
So you've probably heard a salesperson say, you're willing to give up on a deal just because you can't track it?
Pretty much,
yeah.
Yes.
And that's where I would generally go ballistic.
Or one of Lou's famous ones, if I had $1 for every time he told me this, he's like, we can't run our business by finance's limitations.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's a balance between following the rules and not going overboard. But on the other hand, customers don't always want to buy based on your rules. So the salesperson's just trying to get the deal done, and it can be a little tricky sometimes.
And I think where that all comes together and where it all becomes successful is by the fact that we're all, as a management team, we're all marching to the same drummer. We all have the same goals. And that always brings us back to, what are we trying to accomplish? And we will generally come up with, the right solution.
And one of the other things I'll add is, I think from a business line standpoint here, we have sales reps who are generally trying to sell the right things to the right people. I've been in companies where there are a lot of challenges because there isn't clearly defined guidelines or rules for the sales team and what they can and cannot sell and to who and how. And I think we've done a really good job here of setting up the expectations at the salesperson level, so we don't get into a lot of these. A lot of the things we're talking about are payment or financial type issues that are they're about getting the deal done because of the different way businesses run. But we don't get into situations where we just look at a deal and say, we shouldn't sell that to this customer because it's the wrong thing to do, which is a lot better place to be than I've been in my past.
And we have pretty strict rules on discounting. You have discounting up there. My field managers are allowed a certain level of discount. And generally, if something comes through at a higher discount, Rich will ping me. rather than going, say, directly out to the field sales organization, and then I'll have the discussions with the field team. But we have very few of those because we do have, very strict guidelines in how we do the discounting. We generally don't have any friction between sales and finance in that area.
So typically, if there is a request for a one-off kind of discount that's outside the established rules, that might go to Rich, and then Rich would go to you, Lou, and then Lou, you'd discuss it with the field team, and then come back with your recommendation to Rich? Is that sort of how?
Typically, it would come to me. If it's outside the rules, it comes to me. And at a certain level, then I can approve it. But above a certain level, then that's where I go to Rich. And possibly we even get our CEO involved. But generally, we'll have that discussion. We'll talk through it and, either approve or disapprove.
Yeah. And just going back operationally, commissions, is your commission plan, your sales comp plan, have you ever changed it more than once a year?
Yes. Yeah, we have. I mean, we try not to, but our business is so dynamic, especially with the challenge of this transition from on-premise to subscription, that we've kind of been required to make everything work well for our sales teams, quite honestly.
Mhm. So, okay. Well, we'll talk a little bit about some of those specific things. But in terms of sales targets, have you ever changed the target more than once a year?
No, not really.
I mean, you might do a individual promotion or something that was very specific, sort of separate from the comp plan, but
sure, we've had those things happen. Typically, when we put our plan in place for the year, we pretty much stick to that plan.
Mhm. Okay. Cool. Well, in terms of sort of getting into the nitty-gritty, you talk about one system of record, which is the CRM, and maybe Rich, you can talk a little bit about before we get into tracking commissions and that kind of thing, and sort of the reconciliation. Do you use the CRM system for invoicing? I'm assuming you don't use it for revenue recognition, but how does that work? How do you connect between the CRM system and a financial system?
We have an integration set up that whenever there's a close-won opportunity in Salesforce, it gets integrated into our ERP system. And then once it gets integrated into our ERP system, my finance team works their magic through invoicing, subscription billing, RevRec, and all that other stuff. But it all starts with Salesforce and close-won opportunities.
Okay, so booking number would be your ARR or MRR number.
Generally, I mean, we sell a lot of multi-year deals, so we're working through that right now on reporting-wise between bookings and ARR.
Okay. And then in terms of commissions, and I guess this is a question for Christian. I'm assuming, Christian, you're the one who does the commission report. How often produce that and share it with the sales organization, and how do you do that?
That's actually not me, that's Rich, so I'll let him take that.
The first thing that happens here is your second bullet there where it says the reconciliation. At the end of a month, after we close out the month, my team has a very rigorous reconciliation process to reconcile our Salesforce to our ERP system. And once that's reconciled, then my team, someone on my finance team, creates the commission statements based off of the Salesforce data.
Okay, so the salespeople get a commission statement every month?
That's correct. We generally try to get it out to them by the 7th of the month. That way they have a chance to review it, and then it's in their paycheck a week later. So there's plenty of the time for the sales reps to look it over to make sure something wasn't omitted or things like that by an opportunity closing error or just a general error that happened.
Uh-huh. Okay. Do you ever have situations where, I don't know if it would be, I mean, what do you do if a salesperson says this isn't right, or does it go back to the finance team to figure out where the difference in information?
Yeah, generally, they'll generally go to the finance team to say, hey, how come I wasn't paid on this deal? And then we'll research it on our end. And if it was just an opportunity error, then we let the sales rep know you got to change that opportunity so it's correct, and then we fix the commission. If it's something out of the ordinary that's going on with someone's commission and whether or not they should have been paid on an op, sometimes we go back to Lou to get his guidance on how we should proceed with the payments. Mm-hmm. But generally, I'd say 9 times out of 10, it's a data quality issue that my finance team works with the sales team directly and fixes it. So it's really not that big of a deal. And we don't have many of them because our sales team is very diligent and we have rules on how to close opportunities. And so 9 times out of 10, the data is right to begin with, and you just have these outliers that happen. I mean, mistakes happen. So.
And that's where this is Christian. That's where my team comes into play. We ensure that the data is being entered in the Salesforce correct. So we have rules and structure that we've applied to make sure that the right information is in the right fields and at the right time. And then we ensure that the data is getting to Rich's team effectively so that they can sort of go through this process. So we're sort of making sure that the plumbing works and the data that's coming in is as correct as possible for the team to start to evaluate.
Besides the sort of checks and balances you have that the salespeople are incented, in a sense, to make sure the data is correct so that they get paid properly, are there tools? You know, there's so many sales management tools out there, everything from, mobile audio systems to input information into Salesforce or whatever. Are there tools that you found that have really helped in the efficiency of getting the sales organization or just keeping the CRM system clean?
I mean, in general, I think one of the biggest changes here from previous experience is mobile is not a big part of the sales team. Our sales team is generally here in our offices or working at their remote locations. Previous companies I've been at, mobile is always a very important topic, and here it's not at the top of the priority list. But I think in general what we've tried to do is really just use the core Salesforce platform's capabilities to help guide the salespeople in putting the right data in and telling them, if you do this, then this information has to be filled in. And so for now we're really looking at trying to frame out as they progress through the different steps in the stages in the opportunity, what data is important, what data is necessary, and especially when, as Rich said, when they win the opportunity and it sends through to our ERP system, is really where we want to ensure that the data is correct as possible so that the finance team has little or no work to do to sort of process that and the customer gets their software in as clean and simple a process as we can do. I think we are continually looking at different tools to help that process. I love the new Salesforce application, their CPQ, or used to call Steelbrick. I think that could have a ton of value, but it's something that you need to always evaluate the cost and impact of deploying something like that in regards to the benefits. So part of what I do is look at those things pretty frequently to see if there's something that we can use that would continue to make things better.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This is Rich, and going on the theme of the friend or foe, this is probably an area where the finance team gets frustrated sometimes at the month end when we're trying to do our reconciliations because let's say an opportunity, all they had to do was click a certain field that we need clicked off on an opportunity, and they don't do it. What happens is on the finance side, after we've invoiced it and everything, it'll take finance like a half an hour to unwind something that should have taken the rep less than a second to do if they would have filled out the opportunity correctly. And so sometimes that's frustrating on the finance end.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it does, when it happens, if the certain reps that it happens to, we go through a training process. We let them know why it's important, and let them know the downstream impact that it has on other team members. So it's not a reoccurring thing that happens all the time.
Yeah, and as Christian kind of alluded to that extent, we try to make the right fields mandatory so that they have to be clicked or something has to be entered. There's only so many fields, though, that can work well that way, and some other fields just for particular reasons can't necessarily be mandatory because reps always go in and out of an opportunity. So we've tried our best to eliminate that type of friction by having particular fields mandatory that makes everything flow properly.
Okay. So it's really it's sort of like doing a survey, knowing what to make mandatory so that you get the information, but not making everything mandatory so that people can't get through the system.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of the errors that we found that the sales reps weren't as diligent as they could be on the opportunities, we make those required.
Yeah, we analyze each issue that comes through and say, how could we, obviously make that change so that it doesn't happen again. And we've done that a number of times.
Cool. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions on, some of the other difficult things like clawbacks or post-sales issues that affect revenue recognition and things like early cancellation, things like that. But I do want to ask the audience if they're interested in asking any questions to type into the chat field and send us a message because we are getting close up to the end of our session, and we've only got about 10 more minutes. So, Rich, maybe you could talk a little bit about, how do you handle it when, have you already paid out commission, and what happens if there's an early cancellation, or how do you reconcile some of those things?
Generally, the cancellations, they're a one-off thing. We generally don't allow cancellations of contracts, and so it really hasn't been an issue. On the few occasions where it's happened, then we do claw back the commission on it. But if it's an issue of we sending someone to collections and having to get a collections agency involved with the payment of it, then we don't claw back or hold anything back from sales reps on those instances.
Okay. Are there instances where you, in general, reps have gotten paid, but the company has not gotten paid?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do have, like any other company, we do have some bad debt that we've had to write off accounts. But in those cases, the finance team, before we grant credit to somebody, we have a pretty diligent process on who we grant credit to. We use Dun & Bradstreet for a lot of our larger deals, and then we sell through a partner channel as well. So we have relationships, history with the partners. So we give credit to our partners, and so we haven't had a really bad debt issue. And we also have a collection agency that we use too. So when it gets to that point, we just send over accounts over to collections. But that's a collaborative effort as well with the sales team, because before my controller sends over accounts to a collection agency, she lets the sales team know, hey, listen, these 7 accounts I'm sending over to collections. We haven't had any luck with them. So,
and the sales team will jump in and we'll work to contact those customers or partners as well. And a lot of times that's enough to get things moving and actually get payment if it's a late payment or and if someone's looking to cancel, we actually have at least on our subscription service side of things, we have an aftermarket sales team that works very closely with our existing accounts. So we generally know if there are issues there that may be causing them to want to cancel down the line. And we work very hard to get them not to cancel, whether it's using a platform for another purpose within the company or so on. But and we also try to not greatly negatively impact a sales rep. If it turns out that there's a cancellation, someone's been paid a commission and there's a cancellation, but the cancellation for whatever reason was completely out of control of what the sales team may have done, then we may go back and say, well, we're not going to take back that commission, if you will, on that particular deal.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I mean, from a cultural perspective, I would bet that also helps the sales team know that if they follow the rules in general, they'll get taken care of. And if they don't follow, you sometimes have organizations that are sort of out of control and the rules aren't well established, or it's a real cowboy mentality, and then it's harder to get people to follow the rules.
Yeah, well, one of our core values as a company is respect for those around us, and that includes our team members, our customers, and so when we talk about our team members, it really goes. We want our team members to respect the management team and we want to respect them. And I think things like that go a long way to show that we're here to support them in their career.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, let's just take a minute and talk about in terms of SaaS metrics. I think everybody in the SaaS space knows that churn or renewal rates are incredibly important. And one of the things that we've heard from a lot of companies, where particularly when they're going through in acquisition processes, where if they're defining their renewal rate by bookings and it's coming out of the CRM, and sales might have a more generous policy around when a company renewed. For example, if the actual renewal date was May 15th, but the customer doesn't actually sign the contract or place the order until June 2nd, if somebody else looks at the records, they might review, and that's why I mentioned M&A, because it comes up a lot of times when companies say their renewal rate is 90%, but if you went back and looked at it in a different way, it might be something less than that, and that has actually affected the acquisition price with some of the companies that we know. How do you reconcile that? Because it sounds like your data is coming out of the CRM system. Do you ever have that problem where customers don't exactly renew right on the exact date, unless you have an automatic renewal? But even then, with credit cards changing or payment systems changing, it's not that easy to maintain that 100% for all customers. How do you manage that, both from the sales perspective and from the importance of managing your SaaS metrics like churn?
This is Rich. About 4 years ago or so, I used to try to get this data out of Salesforce and figure out all my churn metrics, and it was really a nightmare for the reasons that you just mentioned, that maybe at opportunity they didn't renew till like several days later, and so it wasn't showing up in my churn calculations. And a way that I solved that problem was I use a third-party app called SaaS Optics, and our Salesforce data, our subscription Salesforce data, is integrated into there, and that helps me tremendously with churn calculations and retention and effective renewal rates, and any SaaS metric that I need, MRR growth for customers, it's all at my fingertips through that application that I use.
Excellent.
So it takes all that guesswork that you were talking about, all that gray area, and it gets it out of the equation, because everything is based on subscription dates, their annual subscription dates. So if something falls out of that, then unfortunately it's counted a churn until later time if they do renew.
Yep. Well, we know that
Conservative. It's very conservative, which is my nature.
funny enough, being in finance.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Well, we're going to have to wrap up and make some conclusions out of all of this. I've jotted down on the slide here one of the key things I heard from you all when we prepared for this and had the initial discussions were a couple of points. One, having one source of truth that finance and sales agrees upon, and it being the sales system makes sales incented to maintain that system, but also being a very data-driven company helps you, make decisions and eliminate friction by being data-driven. But also having, it sounds like you have very good CEO leadership and management agreement on what the targets are, so that regardless of the fact that you may want to get to the end in different ways, and finance may be more oriented towards sort of a rules-based way of doing things, and sales may be more creative about it at times. And Christian will statistically analyze the outcome of both. It sounds like you managed to do a great job with that. Are there other best practices or conclusions you want to share with the group as we wrap up?
Well, I think I'll just make this comment. I think one of the things among our management team here is, obviously we're all focused on the same targets, but I really think there is truly a great deal of respect, for each other's backgrounds and qualifications for what they do. So when I'm working with Rich, when he starts talking numbers and finance and trends and all that, I respect that because he's got a great background in it. Same thing with Christian. So I think that's a big part of it, and hopefully the respect goes the other way as well. But I think that goes a lot to, as a management team, being able to work well together when we confront these areas of friction.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely an important point, and I think a lot of problems can't be solved just immediately with one quick answer, and just even thinking about the hiring, having the right people in the right positions, it sounds like a cliche, but it is so true, and it actually takes some effort to do that. But in talking to you all, it's just, you can see why you work well together, because you all have a lot of great experience and you're good at what you do. So it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for being members of the SaaS benchmarking community. With that, I'm going to wrap it up. And if anyone wants to send us questions or comments, we'd be happy to hear that. And we are running in Q2 right now. I'll invite anybody on the webinar, and we'll send out an email to everyone who registered, a short survey on SaaS sales commission rates, which I think will be super interesting. So please participate in that, and everybody have a great Q2. Thanks very much, and thank you very much to the folks at Scribe for Christian, Lou, and Rich for participating in our webinar. Thanks again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for having us.